Have you ever just stopped and thought about how many different ways people talk? I mean, the world is just buzzing with thousands of languages, and every single one has its own vibe, its own rules. So how in the world do you even start to make sense of all that? Well, it all kicks off by asking one really big question. And this is it. This is the big one for linguists. You're looking at more than 5,000 languages spoken right now. How do you even begin to figure out what they have in common? Or what makes them unique? Are there any patterns at all? It seems like an impossible task, right? But there is a way. There's a whole science dedicated to sorting through this beautiful chaos.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with something we all do, our instinct to sort things. Then we'll get into the actual rules for how scientists do it. After that, we'll see why trying to classify language is such a huge challenge. Then the fun part, a quick tour of some really cool language types. And finally, we'll see why, in the real world, nothing is ever that simple.
All right, first up, let's talk about something that's just baked into our DNA. Not just as scientists, but as people. Our deep, deep need to organize stuff.
Think about it. Before you can really get your head around anything, doesn't matter if it's a star, a plant, or a sentence, you have to sort it out first. You've got to figure out its properties, put it in a group. This is step one for making sense of a complicated world. It lets you compare, contrast, and finally actually understand what you're looking at.
Okay, but just making piles of things isn't really science, is it? To do this properly, you have to play by a few key rules. It's about building a system that actually makes logical sense.
This slide shows a really important difference. So on one hand, you have dissection. That's like taking a car apart into a door, a wheel, and an engine. None of those parts are a car anymore, right? But on the other hand, you have classification. That's like putting cars, trucks, and buses into a group called vehicles because they all share certain features. Linguistic typology, what we're talking about today, is all about that second one. We're not breaking a sentence into nouns and verbs, we're grouping whole languages together based on what they have in common.
And for that kind of classification to actually hold up, it needs to follow these rules. Basically, everything inside one of your boxes needs to share the same important features. And just as important, things outside that box can't have those features. And finally, all your little boxes have to fit together perfectly to make up the whole picture, with no gaps. So yeah, it's a pretty rigorous process.
So, how do we take these nice, clean, logical rules and apply them to something as messy and alive as human language? Well, that's where things get really, really interesting and incredibly tough. Just let that number sink in for a second. Over 5,000. That is the massive scale of the problem. And it's not just the sheer number of them. A ton of these languages have barely been studied at all. So our data set is huge, but it's also got all these frustrating blank spots. And the problems don't stop there. First off, languages are alive. They're always changing. The English that people spoke 500 years ago would sound totally alien to us today. And second, languages don't live in a bubble. They crush into each other, borrow words, steal grammar, and all that contact makes the lines between them super fuzzy. Those neat little boxes we wanted to use, they start to fall apart pretty quick. So, even with all these challenges, what have linguists managed to figure out? Well, let's take a quick spin and look at just a few of the amazing ways that languages build our reality. Let's start with something like pitch. So in a language like English, which is an intonational language, I can use my pitch to show emotion. I can say, really? Going up. Or really? Going down. The meaning of the word doesn't change. But in a tonal language like Mandarin Chinese, changing the pitch of a syllable changes the entire meaning of the word. The sound ma can mean mother, hemp, horse, or to scold, all depending on the tone you use. Wild, right? Or how about this? What's the most important part of a sentence? In English, we're a subject-prominent language. We focus on who's doing the action. I ate the apple. But in a topic-prominent language, like Mandarin, you might build the sentence around the topic itself. That apple, I ate it. The whole focus shifts from the person doing the eating to the apple being eaten. It's a small tweak, but it completely changes your point of view. And then, of course, you've got word order. English and Mandarin are mostly subject-verb-object, or SVO. I love you. Simple enough. But a huge number of the world's languages, like Japanese, are subject-object-verb, or SOV. So to say the same thing, you'd literally say, I, you, love.
It just goes to show you that the very basic building blocks of a thought can be put together in totally different ways.
Okay, so we've got all these nice, clean categories: tonal, SVO, topic prominent. But remember when we talked about those fuzzy boundaries? Well, this is where it all comes together.
This right here, this is probably the most important takeaway of this whole thing. In the real world, languages almost never fit perfectly into just one box. They're not these pure, perfect examples of a type. Instead, they just sort of lean one way more than another.
The official term for this is typological tendency. And a great way to think about it is this. It's not a series of light switches that are either on or off. It's more like a whole bunch of dimmer switches or sliders. A language can be, say, 80% this type, but have 20% of features from another type. That's the messy reality that linguists get to work with.
And Mandarin Chinese is the perfect example. We generally call it a verb-object language, but it has all kinds of sentence structures where the object comes before the verb, showing those SOV features we just talked about. Even its tone system is a mix. It's mostly what you'd call a syllable tone language, but it also has features of word tone languages. It's not just one thing or the other. It's this complex, fascinating blend. So you see, the science of typology isn't really about finding rigid boxes to shove languages into. It's about mapping all these different tendencies and trying to understand the incredible, fluid, and dynamic diversity of how we humans express ourselves. Which leaves us with a pretty cool question to think about. The language you speak every single day, what hidden tendencies does it have? What kind of beautiful blend is it?